Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. This is the meeting of the Genealogical Research Society of New Orleans. I'm Stephen Stewart. I'm the president of GRSNO. And happy to see you all tonight. It's going to be a great presentation by our speaker looking forward. I wanted to mention, if you're not familiar with GRSNO, we are a genealogical organization that's been around the metro area for over 60 years. We published the New Orleans Genesis Journal. If you've seen a copy here at the Jefferson Parish Library, or you've perhaps seen it elsewhere at other public libraries, it's a great resource that can help with your research, because our members over the years have documented all sorts of churches and cemetery records and marriage records going through the archdiocese to small churches in the area, as well as they've written articles about their relatives who, that is a benefit because some people find connections through those family histories. So as a member of GRSNO, you get to contribute your research to New Orleans Genesis and build on this tremendous treasure that we have, which is available on our website, grsno.org. I also want to mention that GRSNO has a number of activities that we do during the year that are ways you can connect with other people who are doing genealogical research on their families. We have one of the ones we started about a few months ago is our coffee meet and greet group. And we have our next meeting coming up Wednesday, May 13th. And this is actually going to be a little bit different than our normal coffees. They're going to take a trip to the Williams Research Center at the Historic New Orleans Collection. And Jeremy Honore, who is one of our board members, is going to give a presentation on sources for family history that you can find at the Historic New Orleans Collection. So it's a great opportunity. We have 5 spots left, and this is open only to paid members of GRSNO, but if you join tonight or after tonight, you can contact Michelle, our vice president, and if you need to reach her, just come talk to me after the meeting. I can give you her phone number and email for contact. Tonight, I wanted to just welcome Emily Ford, our guest speaker tonight. Emily is going to talk about tomb ownership and deeds. And this is a follow-up, partially not follow-up, but maybe a part 2 of her presentation that she gave several months ago here in the library, where we talked about tomb care and what to do, what not to do with your family tomb. Tonight's presentation is going to look more at the legal end of things with your title and ownership of the tomb. So Emily is going to, I'll let her kind of get into the details of all that, but we'll touch on things related to Louisiana law and things and questions that you might have. We'll have a question and answer session at the end. So please participate in that, and we're happy to take your questions. Just a little bit of background on Emily. She's a cemetery preservationist, a restoration mason, and architectural historian based in New Orleans. She's a graduate of the Clemson University Master of Science in Historic Preservation program in Charleston. And she's the owner of Oak and Laurel Cemetery Preservation since 2014. So she's deeply experienced in tomb restoration and monument restoration throughout the Gulf South. And she researches and analyzes historic craft and landscapes of historic cemeteries. And we're happy to have her here tonight. And I'll turn the floor over to her and I'll just get your presentation.
Cool. Wonderful. Let's start this one. Everyone, my name's Emily. Like Stephen said, I've been working in New Orleans cemeteries for about 12 years, 15 years, a long time. But in my career, I've had the benefit of being able to work kind of across the spectrum in historic cemeteries. So that means archival research. I also do tomb restoration. Pretty relevant to this as well, I was the superintendent of cemeteries for the city of New Orleans for 5 years. So I've also worked on the administrative side of cemeteries. So I've been very fortunate to kind of get very familiar with all aspects of our historic cemeteries here in New Orleans. This talk specifically is to assist genealogists, historians, and families in understanding cemetery property ownership. So how we're going to do that? We're going to start with kind of discussing definitions. What is a property title? What do we do if we have an original deed? There's some folks who brought their original deeds tonight, which I can't wait to talk about that. Some overview of Louisiana statutes. Louisiana cemetery law, not surprisingly, is pretty applicable to our practice of reuse of tombs. So we want to know the law. Finding title holders, and then any actions that we can take when it comes to cemetery property ownership. So that's title transfers, affidavits, and proving right of interment. I'm going to wrap up to by discussing servitude right of use, which is its own little topic in a topic when it comes to cemetery property ownership. So yeah, this is dense. I've packed a lot in here. I will say right off the bat, I am not an attorney. I am a lot of things. I am not an attorney. I'm not qualified to give legal advice. The information that I am sharing, though, is to the very best of my knowledge, and it is reflected on my experience, and it is absolutely given in good faith. So with that said, let us get in the weeds. So first, what is a cemetery title? In this context, we're not talking about the ownership of an entire cemetery. I do work with folks who are trying to save an entire cemetery. That is a very different ballgame that we probably will not be discussing tonight. In Louisiana law, the owner of a cemetery is referred to as the cemetery authority. So that's one of your definitions that you want to keep in mind. I'm going to say it a lot. The cemetery authority can be a private entity. So say for Metairie, Service Corporation International, a church or a temple like the archdiocesan cemeteries, or the Jewish cemeteries belong to various Jewish congregations, a fraternal order like the Masons or the Oddfellows, or a governmental body like the state or a city. The cemetery authority is responsible for keeping and maintaining records of sales and conveyances. That's one of their jobs. This means that the original sale of a lot should be in the records of a cemetery, and subsequent transfers. A cemetery title or deed, then, in this context, is a document issued by the cemetery authority stating the owner of a cemetery property. It's simple enough, right? But it's kind of not, though. There are actually some complicated aspects to ownership based on the time period in which, say, your ancestor or your family member bought a cemetery property. In some cases, historically, that would mean that, yes, they do own the literal ground on which a tomb is built. More modernly, that doesn't really mean that. It actually means that you own the burial rights to a space and not the literal ground on which a tomb is built. So in general, it is best to presume that a title is a physical documentation of burial rights to the person that it is issued by the cemetery authority. So there can be burial rights to a single lot, to a tomb, to a coping. There can be ownership of a space in a mausoleum, right? Like say All Saints or Lake Lawn, or some other structure like a society tomb. Or there can be servitude rights. Servitude rights are defined as a right by which a property owned by one person is subject to a specified use or enjoyment by another. So this is mostly for community mausoleums, right? A community mausoleum belongs to a private entity, but you have a servitude for your little niche or your burial space. In any case, any of these scenarios, it is the cemetery authority that must keep the records of who holds the title or deed. And that means not only the original lot owner, but to whom it may have been transferred in the over the years, which we'll get into how those transfers happen. For historic properties, a lot of deed books are on microfilm at the New Orleans Public Library and also here. That is actually pretty much the same set of microfilm here at Jefferson Parish Library in New Orleans. This is always the first place I would tell somebody to look to get the title holder is through these deed books. Sometimes they're called lot registers. But a lot of them are microfilmed. So this is a good example of one. This is the deed book for Carrollton Cemetery. And as you can see, it's got the section, old plan, the lot, 67, this is the 60s, the date of sale, and the original title holder. And you can see that over the years, the people at the city cemetery offices were making little, adjustments. So we have like on the top line, Mr. Marsloff purchased the lot in 1867, but later on, Mrs. R. Marsloff came by and said, oh, I'm the contact for the tomb. And so they wrote in, I think VE is Vernon. Does anybody know their telephone prefixes? Anyway. Yeah. So we still have, so we have her contact information. I'm presuming that's like probably 60s. But this is what a deed book looks like, and where you should be able to get this information. So say you have an original title. Congratulations. That's awesome. So many people have lost the titles for their family tombs over the years. It's so rare and wonderful to still have them. There's a really good chance it's probably not your name on the title, right? It's somebody that, died a very long time ago. It is one of the things I would say, absolutely, it is very wise to reach out to the cemetery authority and let them know that you are the one who is holding it. A cemetery title in a lot of ways is like a pink slip to a car. And so having it in hand can be pretty important. So it's very good for the cemetery authority to know who is holding that document. It also means the cemetery authority knows it still exists, which I know when I worked for the city was very helpful. This came up in conversation right before the talk. Some cemeteries have rules about periods of non-activity on a tomb. Like say, oh, it's been 50 years since there was any sort of activity on the tomb, then it's abandoned. So it's very good to notify the cemetery that you have that title, because that can also constitute activity on the tomb. Super handy. If you have an original title, make sure other members of your family are aware you are in possession of it. It's just very, very, very important. Just in case, somebody else needs to know. Please do not laminate it. If you have laminated, it'll be okay, but avoid doing so. This is a picture of a record book that we had at the city of New Orleans, and it pretty much destroyed by bad lamination. So lamination can harm old documents. And it's not advisable. There's a lot of really great archival paper and folders that you can put those documents in. You can even put it in a bank. I know a lot of people who will put that in a bank vault or in a safe. That's great as long as somebody else knows where it is. If your name is on the title, this also came up in conversation, or even if it isn't, consider noting this in your will. It is property. And so that way there is no question about how you wish for that document and the rights associated with it to be transferred. So moving on to how the law works. If you're the title holder, and this means you have the document and it's your name on the document. If you are the title holder of record, if that's your name in the book that the cemetery authority has, you have the right. I mean, other people do in this case. You have the right to open the tomb for burial, which we'll get into who can and cannot. But you can also sell the tomb, and you can demolish the tomb if you want to. Those are two things that only the title holder can do. If the title holder is alive, which like we've said is not necessarily always the case, they are the only one who can make decisions about the tomb. If it is your name on that title, you are alive. You are the only one who can make decisions about that tomb. Most of the time, that's not the case, obviously. And so the descendants, the direct descendants of that person, have right of interment. They are also called successors in interest. Typically, this will follow the laws of succession for the state of Louisiana. And this is the part where this is the only part I'm quoting statute, I promise. But this is all of the Louisiana statutes on cemeteries is Title 8. So this is Title 8, Section 805. The right to use the cemetery space as a place of interment for the dead of the family of the owner and his descendants shall descend from generation to generation, unless the act of conveyance and trust provides that interments in the space shall be confined to the remains of specific persons, in which case the space shall be forever preserved for the remains of the persons so specified and shall never be used for any other purpose. So put plainly, if you are a descendant, you have a right of interment, unless the purchase of the tomb said something else, which I have seen where, say, somebody donated a tomb to their nephew and wrote in the donation, this is only for my nephew and his children. That does happen sometimes, but you need a document that says that. But I do want to point out, as a place for the interment of the dead of the family is sort of a passive phrase, right? So the definition of burial rights is not actually as exact as I personally would like it to be. Does it mean that you yourself hold the right for your remains to be placed in the tomb? Or does it mean that you hold the right to open the tomb for the burial of others? We talked about this with the cemetery board. It seems to be a little bit of a gray area. At the city cemeteries, we treated it as the latter, that if you were a descendant, then you have the right to open the tomb for burial of others. But just expect for that topic to come up. So this is where this is how I think about titles. So we have our original title holder here, right? And so we have one whole pie, right? That title holder presumably passes away, says nothing in his will about what he wants the tomb. He may not even note in his will that the tomb exists. Passes away. So that means he died intestate when it came to the tomb. So that means it's just going to follow the natural line of succession, which means it's going to be split between his two children. So that means his two children in this scenario hold a half interest in the tomb, right? Presumably they die intestate. And I'm being very simple here by being 2 and 2. This can get way more complicated. But as time goes on, this is what we have is successors in interest are pie holders. So if you are a descendant of a person who, has a historic tomb in a cemetery, you may not know exactly who they are, but there are other people around, presumably, who also have an interest in the tomb, if the person died long enough ago. So that's something that you're going to want to do if you want to take any sort of action on tomb ownership or rights of interment in the tomb, is you need to know what your relationship is to that title holder and be able to document it. So sometimes I do hear like, oh, well, my great grandparents are buried in the tomb. Do I have a right of interment? I'm not sure, because it's not necessarily who's buried in the tomb, it's whose name is on the title. That's what matters. So where are you in terms of pieces of the pie? How many other pie holders are there? The cemetery is going to want to know this information if you want to take any action in terms of burial rights or title transfers. So if the title holder is deceased, then the successors in interest collectively, this is basically what I'm saying, is that there's still a pie, right? Collectively comprise the ownership of the tomb. Many cemeteries are satisfied with that documentation alone, depending on what you're trying to do. How you prove this can vary. So and this is entirely from my experience, but what I have learned is that Mount Olivet, Metairie Cemetery, and St. Vincent de Paul cemeteries owned by Service Corporation International do tend to have a higher bar, and they will often ask people to track down the other successors in interest in order to approve of a burial. Greenwood, from what I have understood, follows a general affidavit process, which we'll discuss the affidavit process. Kind of everybody does this. Usually when you do an affidavit, there's also a hold harmless affidavit that needs to come along with that, saying that you will hold the cemetery harmless. City-owned cemeteries, what we would do, we have lot files. Well, they have lot files, sorry. But they will pull the file for the lot in question and review the past paperwork to see if you are an authorized person. So they kind of do a little bit more of a piggyback thing. So if your parents approved a burial back in the 70s, and you can show your relationship to that parent, sometimes that will be sufficient to open the tomb, as opposed to going all the way back to the 1850s. If there isn't something like that in the file, there's a pretty good chance you'll have to do an affidavit. So, state law is also sort of replicated in the city ordinances for the city of New Orleans. We updated these back when I worked for the city, so they're a little bit more comprehensive. But we did actually keep the one thing in the statute that we did keep. It was illegal to play a gramophone in the cemeteries. That was actually one of our old laws. We kept that one. It just seemed too bad. We didn't want to. But so we kind of wanted to give a better idea of what these affidavits of death and heirship are. So an affidavit outlines the requesting party's line of descent from the title holder of record, stating the names of all the descendants and the collateral relations, and whether or not they are dead or alive. And also you do have to include a hold harmless clause. So you're basically putting together your family tree in relation to the title holder of record. This was something that was a sort of a holdover from the old statute, but it still remains. And this is for a title transfer specifically, an affidavit of a disinterested or informed person setting forth the facts of the death of the title holder of record and identifying the spouse and descendants and heirs of the title holder of record. So this is something that we saw, and it exists in the files. It's a little bit easier when you had somebody who bought a tomb in, say, the 20s versus, the 1950s. But so say like a neighbor who was just saying, I know so-and-so, I've read the affidavit they wrote, and to the best of my knowledge, it is true. So they will ask for something like that if you're seeking a title transfer. What if you want the whole pie? Right? Well, what if you want to be the person with the name on the title, right? Succession and interest is probably, for most cemeteries, going to be enough for burial, right? But there are plenty of reasons for people want the whole title, right? And that's if you want to sell the tomb, which that sometimes is the case for some people. If you're the only descendant left and you want to make sure that your descendants are recognized as owners. If you have any number of complicated family situations, there's definitely things like that. Or you don't want the cemetery to make you file an affidavit every time you want to open the tomb. Those are reasons that you would get a title transfer and have your name placed on the title. So to become a title holder, you have to formally request to the cemetery authority, I want a title transfer. I am requesting a title transfer. And you have to do that affidavit process showing that not only that you are a direct descendant, but who else is a direct descendant, who is living and who is dead. Yeah. Did I put this? I got ahead of myself. So the affidavit process I'm actually going to get into later. I am going to start with the easier one, which is an act translative of title. So this is way easier. A will, an act of sale, a judgment of possession, or any other legal document that states that the property once belonged to the original title holder and is now being transferred to you. So this is an act of sale. This is a donation. This is a will from the person who had the title, stating, I want this to go to my family member. You simply take this act translative of title, bring it to the cemetery authority with a letter saying, I want this to take place. And then the cemetery authority will review and decide whether or not to reissue the title in your name. Very simple. But this also means that it pretty much only happens when there's one pie holder giving the whole pie to somebody, right? Acts translative of title are also really helpful for society tombs. Cemeteries with property belonging to religious groups, societies. So the state presbytery, when I worked for the city of New Orleans, we had several Presbyterian tombs of churches that dissolved. And for something like the Presbyterians, if you have a Presbyterian church and it dissolves, then all of the property goes up to the state presbytery, whether it's enumerated in their dissolution papers or not. So all I had to do was call the state presbytery and be like, you guys know you own a tomb? And they're like, no, we didn't. And then we could reissue the title in their name so they could have formal ownership of it. This is another example. This is the Helvetia Lodge number 43 Tomb and Balance Cemetery. And it's an Oddfellows Lodge that went out of business in 1908. However, the state Grand Lodge provides for any of the property of lodges that dissolve goes up to the Grand Lodge. So all the Grand Lodge needed was to be informed that they owned a tomb, and they could put in a request with the city to have the title transferred into their name. So easy in the right circumstances. This is the affidavit part. This is where we're reassembling the pie. So for a transfer, not only should you have to do that whole affidavit process, then you have to chase down the pie holders. And you have to ask them to hand over their pie to you. It sounds very daunting, but it's actually, it does happen. And you're never really sure how many pie holders there are until you start looking. Sometimes there's, 50, sometimes there's 3. But in any case, you have them sign over that interest to you. You present that documentation to the cemetery. Typically, the cemetery will have an attorney look that stuff over, at which point they will take the whole pie reassembled and issue it to you. And then finally, it is possible to request a judgment of possession from a court. So this is more in the cases of society tombs too, especially when there's just like no documentation of ownership remaining. This is where you would petition, you do definitely need an attorney for this version, but you petition a judge to declare that the property belongs to you. Obviously, you have to make a case for that. So in the case of the tomb pictured here, this is the Termini Marese tomb, and a descendant family of one of the members petitioned a judge stating that, they don't know that there are any other members, there is no property left over from the society, and they had the title transferred to their family. So now it is the Palumbo family too. So yeah, it has taken place. It's obviously pretty difficult, but this is another way to do it by court order. Getting into some more like sort of less common things. What if there's no owner listed? What if there's no title holder of record whatsoever? I have to say that's extremely rare. Lot registers were kept up. This was something, it was required by law after, like, say, the 70s, but even prior to this, cemeteries kept records of who they were selling lots to. So that's pretty rare. If it does happen to be the case, for sure, that there is no evidence of a title holder of record, that's a matter that the cemetery authority would need to discuss with the cemetery board. Specifically, there's the Louisiana Cemetery Board about which laws would apply in this case, because there are laws for property that belongs to the cemetery authority. What if it's abandoned? So there are 2 state statutes that pertain to the abandonment of cemetery property. I could say these ones in my sleep. That is Louisiana Revised Statutes, section 903 and 308, the abandoned tomb statutes. They give a roadmap to identify and reclaim cemetery property. Basically, it means the roadmap is the cemetery authority needs to post notice in the newspaper of record for 2 years, post notice on the tomb for 2 years, and then make a diligent effort to find the title holder of record. After those 2 years, the cemetery authority can make repairs to that tomb. And then 2 years after those repairs, after posting notice for another 2 years, the cemetery authority can absorb ownership of the property. That sounds really tough, right? But it's not impossible. We did it. We did it with a tomb in Lafayette number 2. It got restored. It is possible to do it. It's a lot more easily utilized than they're given credit for. But the bottom line is the cemetery authority is the one that needs to do it. It's not something that an individual person can do on their own. A private citizen or a nonprofit can help a cemetery conduct the diligent effort, like doing the genealogical research, finding the descendants, and provide that to the cemetery authority. But it's the cemetery authority that is the only one that can enact these policies. So yeah, after the protocol is addressed, the cemetery authority takes ownership of the property and can sell it if it wants or not. So now what? If you've transferred your title, like what does that mean for you? What do you do now? obviously you wanted to document it in your will, so on and so forth. They will reissue the deed in your name. You will have a new piece of paper with there's a good chance they'll take the old one. And with your name on it. Bear in mind, some cemetery authorities do require people to sign a perpetual care agreement before they do a title transfer. So that is something that might happen. And then I said I was going to bring this up at the end. Servitude right of use is another little animal inside of all of this. It is typically really only associated with the city-owned cemeteries of Holt, Carrollton, and St. Mary's. And it's the perimeter lots in St. Mary's, it's Carrollton, Freeland, and it's all of Holt. It is the right of a specific use of a property owned by somebody else, like I said. However, it's the right of use of a burial spot that belongs to the city. And it has its background in cemetery segregation and some like Potter's Field kind of things. In this scenario, people who were issued a servitude right of use only had it for a couple of years. And these are areas of cemeteries that are not mapped in any way. There's not like a lot number or a deed. For a lot of these folks, they were told that if they could just keep their lot marked, they could keep it. And if the marker goes away, then it will be used for somebody else. This is something that still happens in some of in these cemeteries. Servitude right of use can still be transferred. So we did do this a lot for the city of New Orleans. But for those who have family members buried in those cemeteries, it's something that they really should just reach out directly to the city of New Orleans to work out. And also for those people who have family buried in those cemeteries, document. Lots and lots of photographs. Make sure that those markers are photographed, and you know exactly where they are. But that is a little bit different than, say, the formal title and lot system that most cemeteries operate under. And I actually did this under my time, which I'm very grateful for, because I'm sure you guys have lots of questions. So I will say thank you so much for your time, and can I answer any questions?
You may have covered this before we got here, but what is the situation with community property law? Say, one pot, one owner, but he's married. So now that possibly could become, over time, community property.
So I'm not sure in the case of, like, say, property ownership, like after, are you asking about like after a divorce or after a death?
No, let's say there's, I don't want to throw any complications in like before. Let's just say there's a husband and a wife.
Mm-hmm.
They have children.
Mhm.
Do. Husband dies, gets buried in the tomb.
Mhm.
Wife dies.
Mhm.
Where does she go? Because it's always been in husband's name.
Spouses, that gets real sticky. It definitely does. In general, I would refer to the Louisiana laws of succession, and hope that somebody was specific in their bequeathments, because it can get it. Frankly, if I was in a position where I was authorizing that burial, I would just make sure all three of them, like that the children authorize the burial of the wife, and hopefully there aren't any other descendants, floating around. But no, that is always, it is a complicated situation, and not being an attorney, I would say default to the laws of succession. And after that, it would have to be something that people would discuss with the cemetery authority.
Yeah, I've got a very similar situation. It involved the tomb and memory cemetery, and it's separate property of my husband, because he inherited it from his parents. So it stays in one line, and I am just trying.
Yeah, because he is a successor in interest and you are not. Yes, of course.
But so in order, his brother is also married, have a child, brother doesn't, but in order for Metairie Cemetery or Service Corps they required that both my husband and his brother sign affidavits allowing me and my sister-in-law to be buried in the tomb in the future, and also we wanted my son, who would be a successor in interest, for him to be able to have the right to be buried there, and any spouse of his and any children, that all had to be included in the affidavit. So it's something that we really should take care of ahead of time,
Absolutely.
and, that's what we did, but Metairie Cemetery required all that.
Metairie tends to be, from what I understand, much more heavy on the paperwork, which can, I mean, I think that's a great idea, because I've had families who wanted to buy a tomb next door for the spouses because it was so complicated. It was just like, we'll have a spouse's tomb next door. Because these things can be complicated. But yeah, no, thank you so much. That's perfect. That really explains it.
Two things, the year and the day thing, and also the use of a metal casket in a family tomb.
Very good question. By the way, Stephen, should I be repeating the question?
If you could,
Okay,
yeah,
of course.
yes.
So for the folks who are listening remotely, the gentleman asked about the year and a day rule and metal caskets. So year and a day rule, that was never a law. There was never any sort of like hard and fast rule about that. It is a tradition. Most cemeteries do not observe that, simply because it probably worked really well before embalming and before airtight burial containers. Modern burial containers, even if they're not metal, will have an air seal. And so it's really not practical to reuse a tomb after a year and a day. We would have rules sometimes about 2 years typically. However, we would have some tombs that had said like 90 burials in it and be like, we're gonna wait 5 years. So sometimes that's necessary. I know that the cemetery, believe me, the cemetery authorities will do everything they can to make sure that they can accommodate burial. But it's definitely never going to be a year and a day. And most cemeteries have their own rules on it. I think for in-ground burials, we did 2. And then, yeah, tomb burials too. Yeah.
As a matter of practicality,
Yeah.
though, if there's a fresh burial.
Yeah.
What happens then? If you're making plans for
Sure.
a reuse of that particular tomb.
Yes.
You have an issue there.
Yes, yeah. Well, reuse is always going to be complicated because it's reuse, but yes, in terms of, most tombs are going to have 2 vaults. If you have 2 burials that have taken place in subs 2, years next to one another, like, yeah, it can be a while. A lot of cemeteries will encourage cremation if it's something that people are interested in. You can definitely accommodate a lot more in a tomb. Now, metal caskets can be very problematic. A lot of cemeteries will not permit them. Or if you do insist upon using one, they will basically make it so you can't bury in that vault for 25 years. We had plenty of times where, you say, open up the tomb and there's a metal casket there and there you are. They simply cannot be disposed of. Just not without a lot of complication. So while people really like them, and I absolutely get why they do, if you want the tomb to be reused, it's a really good idea not to use a metal casket. And I'm talking about ones from like the 1860s and now, all of them. They're very problematic.
But did somebody with a right of use can they permit?
Yes, unfortunately, well, yes, for better or for worse, yes. So if you had, say, like a family member who had a right of interment, unless the cemetery is, I would expect most cemeteries to have some wits about them when it comes to that. I think that's one reason why they just don't allow them a lot of the time. But yes, are there scenarios where one family member will do a burial with a metal casket, therefore prohibiting burials of others moving on? Yes. Yeah, I will say for a lot of folks, a lot of this can be, I've known groups of descendants who will form, say, like a trust, like a family trust that makes these decisions about the tomb. And it's the trust that authorizes burials. That's a good way to go about things. If people are so inclined, it would certainly prevent something like that. Hi, back there.
This is specific to my family. My grandparents were interred in mausoleums in St. Vincent de Paul.
Downtown,
Hmm,
Louisa Street?
yeah.
Okay.
And it's been about 18 years since anyone has been there. My mother died and is in a different tomb in Greenwood. Well, anyway, my brother went recently and they are no longer there. He even went to the office and got the person who worked there to look it up. And they went in the hall to where their grave should be in the wall. And my grandparents are not there. Where I want to know what happened to my grandparents. And I know you mentioned something about 2 years they put in the paper.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
What is my recourse?
Thank you.
And I don't,
Again,
to back up, I don't know if we have the deed, because Katrina took a
Sure.
lot of my mother's
What-
papers.
okay, so just for the folks on Zoom, just to recap, your grandparents were buried in the mausoleum at St. Vincent de Paul downtown on Louisa Street.
Correct.
Nobody had been there for a long time, and when they came to visit, it seems as if your grandparents' burials are no longer there.
Correct.
Okay, when did your grandparents die?
My grandfather died in the 70s, like 75, and my grandmother died, 89, 91.
Okay, because that mausoleum was built in the 70s.
And my mother had been there.
Yeah.
To visit her, and I had been with her to go to the graves. I think maybe 2007 was the last time I went. My mother passed in 10.
Okay.
And I haven't gone there by myself.
Okay. Again, I am not an attorney, so please,
No, no,
but what I will say is that, like, when it comes to community mausoleums, which is what the St. Vincent de Paul Mausoleum is, some of them are set up that you have a servitude right of use. The 2-year thing would not apply. It's not 2 years by any means. And if it was, they would see that in their paperwork. That's not gonna be the same thing.
Okay.
That's again, pretty much only Holt, Carrollton, St. Mary's, and only specific parts of Carrollton and St. Mary's. But because you do have, like, say, an easement, like a right of use of that burial space in this larger building that belongs to the cemetery, I'm not sure. I've never heard of anything like that. I think, so Service Corporation International owns that St. Vincent de Paul. I would reach out to Metairie Cemetery and, because they should have documentation of that sale, get the lot number or the vault number, because they have like little letters on them and stuff,
Right.
and the hall and all that. And I would reach out to them directly.
Okay.
Repeatedly if you need to.
Tell me the owners again.
Service Corporation International.
Service Corporation.
So, but they own Metairie Cemetery, they own St. Vincent de Paul downtown, and they own Mount Olivet.
Okay,
So, and they have the records.
that gives me a start.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you. Hey, Brian, what's up?
I inherited a plot in Greenwood from a branch of the family that died out. Last burial was in 91. Doesn't have a culvert around it, just undeveloped land and used twice, 1900 something and 1991. So I've got it. What do I do with it? I've got the paperwork.
Your name,
Sell it?
Okay.
What?
for the folks on Zoom, this is somebody who inherited a lot that does not have any development on it, but there's 2 burials on it in
Yes.
Greenwood. Is your name on the title?
What's that?
Is your name on the title?
I'd have to look. It's a receipt that they bought 1900 something.
And you have the original?
Yes.
So that, like I said, guys, that's like a pink slip for a car in a lot of ways. So like you could bury somebody there easily. I would request for a title transfer if you wanted to sell it, so that's gonna be up to Greenwood. Like they get to decide. The cemetery authority gets to approve any of those sales and stuff like that. They can reject that stuff. So, but you could presumably, if you had your name on the title, you could do that. Yeah. Or you could build a tomb on it.
And somebody else wants to be buried. I'm really interested. No one knows it exists but me.
So, I mean, if you can also, people donate too, like that is a thing that people can do. So, I mean, I would, consider what you want to do with it. Presumably you would need to have the title, even though you're holding the original title, you need to have the title transferred into your name before you did anything like that. But you could talk to them about having it transferred to your name. Yeah. So,
Is there any limit to the amount of people who can be buried in one plot?
is there
The
any,
cemetery also have restrictions that different than all.
is there any limit to how many people can be buried inside a tomb? Yes and no. So I work in masonry, like, and I work in historic tombs. If the way that historic tombs work is very different than modern tombs work. A historic tomb, if properly maintained, could really bury, not necessarily in perpetuity, but very, very effectively for a very long time. However, that would require no embalming, and it would require a non-airtight container, like the caskets that the monks make. Like it would have to be something like that. So that's the yes. The no is kind of nobody does that. People who are embalmed or remains that are embalmed and airtight caskets do very much slow down the process of making a tomb reusable. And also caskets these days have a ton of plastic in them. So it honestly just takes up a lot of space. So no, tombs cannot be buried in perpetuity anymore. Some tombs that are sold now do have limits, like in the documentation. I don't think historic ones did, but I do believe that modern ones do. But a lot of people do accommodate more burials by doing cremations. I've seen tombs that have, more than 100 burials in them, and you can, but that's over the course of 200 years, so it depends. There. Sorry, back there, and then I'll get you, man.
I have a coping in Meadowy Cemetery.
Okay.
And on the deed, it says up to 8 burials. Now, my question is, the 8th burial was my mother, but the 7th burial was my wife. And we cremated. And compare with that. Now, is a cremation the same as a burial?
Okay, so for the folks online, the question was, this person purchased a lot in Metairie Cemetery that the deed did have a specification that there are 8 burials. There are 8 people, but one of them is the person's spouse, and she was cremated. I think that knowing Metairie, especially because they are very much by the book, like if they were to consider that, you would need to get some sort of like addendum to the deed that would permit that, and it would be up to them.
Because they even said I'd have to go to the
Yeah.
original owner, but the original owner was buried in a plot.
Oh, you're not the title holder. Yeah.
I inherited by relationship.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, in that case, yeah, spouse lady.
Situation too. I mean, I've done a lot, I guess, because I'm a lawyer, the
I'm
family.
gonna law you practice.
I did successions and stuff.
There's not enough people that I have to refer to over this stuff, I gotta tell you.
Retired. But we had a situation in Lake Lawn, which is owned by Metairie.
Yeah.
And it's my grandparents had it, and I went through that because my brother got buried in there, my parents are in there, and there's one spot left. And there are too many people that it could be, and I asked them to try specifically to get that, and they said the only people that could request it were the original title holders, since they are both deceased. You're stuck with just
You're
a
stuck.
very.
So you wouldn't,
Cremation, we have several cremations in the Senate.
so it wouldn't work to take all of the successors of an interest and have them pool, like, so say, like, you have all of the pie piece
Yeah,
people.
the pie.
Yeah, so, no, that doesn't,
Not, they said, I mean, I
well,
pushed it more than once, a couple of years apart, trying to get the answer, and they said, it says up to 8 burials. We don't care if they're cremations or what, you can only have 8 burials.
that's,
My cousins, my
Just
mother's,
doesn't seem right.
I know, my
It
mother's
doesn't.
first cousins are 2 over from it, and, I mean, the Redmond family is huge, and they only had that same restriction, so they have lots of little things saying where everybody else is buried, that couldn't go with the parent.
thank you very much, also very, very helpful, ma'am.
So, yeah, just make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah.
Succession of burial rights determines the right of
Yes,
Okay,
well done. Yeah.
so
You understand it better than I do.
some of my questions have already been answered based on this discussion, but so my parents purchased a crib in St. Bernard Cemetery,
Lovely.
and it stated it was burial for my parents are both presently buried there. So that would be two remaining burials. If nothing is done in terms of affidavits or title transfers of anything, because there are three descendants.
Mhm.
So would it be like first come, first served? Who would the two remaining burials?
It would come down to how St. Bernard Parish deals with it. It really would. And like, say if they were Metairie, I would expect them to be really aware of that kind of stuff. However, like for a lot of cemeteries, all you have to do is prove right of interment. So in that case, yeah, you could end up in a situation with first come, first serve. I mean, if there are only three, I would discuss it with the other people who have that right of interment and yeah, make that decision like she said ahead of time.
Yeah, because we can't do an addendum and try and increase the number
They-
because my parents are deceased and they
Yeah.
the original.
Well, I mean, see that just it bugs me. If you all are all three the pie holders, you should be able to constitute ownership. But I would talk to St. Bernard Parish and see how they want to handle it. At the end of the day, it's the cemetery authority that calls those shots, you know? There was a
Thank
ma'am,
you.
yeah,
Yes, a year and a day, I went to a lecture done by the attorneys for the Catholic Church that came from the statute of limitations of a criminal offense. And the church could not be sued after 1 year. And that's why that was placed in because of the cemetery.
I mean, that sounds like a very cute story. I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, I think just because like it was never a statute. Like there is no statute that states that nobody is beholden by any means, you know, under it. But it is very much a part of our culture.
And also, composition of the body. We take, like, years ago, the body decomposed in less time, there was this preservatives, the body takes almost twice as long.
Yeah. Sure does. Yeah. Ma'am.
Yes, my situation is that my aunt bought a dual tomb in the sixties. My grandparents and my aunt are in one side, and my parents are in the other side. And what my aunt understood was whoever held the deed could then have the right to be buried.
Yes.
So my aunt's name was on the deed.
Okay.
All right, so she buried her parents.
Okay.
And then when she died, my mother had, her sister, my mother had the deed and buried my aunt.
Okay.
So now my father died, he went on this side, my mother died, she went on that side.
Lovely.
So I had the deed.
Okay.
But the name on the deed is my aunt. So my question is, which is different from mine,
Yes.
when I die, what do I have to do to make sure I can be buried in it?
Okay, so this is for the folks online, this is somebody who has a family member an aunt owned a tomb. Their parents and grandparents and the aunt are all buried there, but now she holds the title and the name on it is her aunt's. This happens a lot. And this is where there isn't a direct descent.
Right.
And where's the tomb?
Greenwood.
It's in Greenwood. Honestly, I would just say talk to Greenwood. Like because you are not a direct descendant, things do get, did she have children?
No, she wasn't married. and
Okay, so there might be something in there, but that's where you get into the laws of succession where it is definitely beyond my capacity. But you want to talk to them about how they want to handle that right of interment. You hold the original title, so I mean, I think it would be worth just talking to them about
And
that.
who is the person at the time?
At Greenwood, the office numbers on there at greenwoodnola.gov.
Okay.
There used to be two women, Tammy and Sandy there, who were fantastic. I think one of them retired, but one of them is still there.
And one other thing is, years ago, my mother and I went to Greenwood to ask about that question. And whoever we talked to told us we had to give them the deed so they could keep it. And we said, well, we could give you a copy, but we wanted to keep the original. And they said, no, And we said, well, we're not giving you the original because who knows what's gonna happen to it.
Yeah.
So that's anyway.
Yeah, for the folks online, she mentioned that the cemetery wanted to keep the original deed on file for the family, which I think the city did that for a while too. Yeah, you were right not to take it, because I know what the city files look like too. Ma'am in the red sweater?
My parents put on their tomb that it was never to be sold. Is there an avenue around that? No one ended up in the tomb.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, for the folks online, this is somebody who, the family put on the title that the tomb was never to be sold. But now nobody is buried in it and they cannot sell it.
Is there an avenue around that?
Not to my knowledge, but again, that would be an attorney question, but I mean, but that's pretty cut and dry when it comes to the way the statute's written, like, it straight up says, like, if it doesn't, if in the purchase, it's only to be for these people, or there's like those sort of encumbrances, it's hard to get out of those. I'm not sure if you can, I'm sorry.
Me too.
There's somebody over here, the gentleman, the purple shirt.
Or what happens when they find a petrified body in the tomb, they open to put the body in? What do they do with that body?
Oh, okay. So that happens all the time. I mean, if there's a question of just like, what do you do with a burial that is in a tomb already? I mean, like, it's simple enough. Like, the grave diggers are pretty considerate and thoughtful, and they take their job very seriously. They remove their remains and they place them underneath. And you know, yeah, and then the tomb, the vault can be reused. Simple enough. Tombs work well. There's somebody over here, also, ma'am.
My great grandmother's tomb in St. Louis #3. There's no title to it. It's lost through the years. So what documents do you have to have to prove that you are related to this person that owned this tomb?
Have you asked the archdiocese if they have a title holder of record? Okay, that's what you need to do. If you can, St. Louis #3, there's a map of St. Louis #3 that's readily available online. If you can't find it, email me, I can send it to you, because it's a big cemetery, but they actually do have lot numbers. And so get the lot number, reach out to the archdiocese and ask who the title holder of record is. Like, so, and that's where you want to start.
I know who the title holder is. It's my great grandmother.
Okay, well, okay.
But how do we prove that, like, if my brother wanted to be buried in that tomb, his baby is buried there?
Yeah.
How do we have to prove the relationship to her in order for him to be buried there?
You write an affidavit of death and heirship, where you write out all of the direct descendants of those people, and if they are living and dead, yes, then you would want to present, reach out to the archdiocese, the office is in St. Louis 3. Yeah.
The little house in there.
Yes, ma'am, yeah, and they can help walk you through that, but that's where you want to start.
Thank you.
Ma'am.
Is there a phone number or a specific department, sort of? I had the exact same question.
So if you, actually, the Archdiocese and Cemeteries is fantastic. Their website is really good. And they have individual phone numbers for each cemetery system. So they're like for the St. Louis cemeteries or the St. Patrick cemeteries. So
The St. Louis number.
okay.
Exactly like you.
So, if you go on, it's NOLA Archdiocese and Cemetery, or NOLACatholicCemeteries.org. And there's a drop-down menu for the different kinds of cemeteries, like the different names. And there'll be a phone number that you can reach out to there.
You mentioned embalming. Is there a rule on that? That you have to be after so many days now that we have refrigeration?
Okay, so the question was, are you required by law to embalm? And the answer is flat out no. So this goes to, if anybody's interested in this stuff, this is all green burial kind of things. There's an organization in the city called WAKE, WAKE, that does a lot of advocacy for this stuff. But no, pretty much no state requires embalming. Many cemeteries do. City cemeteries don't, I don't know about other ones, but cemeteries can require embalming. Cemeteries can also require, vaults, like subterranean vaults. But there is no requirements, like there's no like health code or anything like that. We do not have a green burial law in Louisiana yet. But there, in a lot of other places, there are cemeteries that completely do not permit embalming or non-biodegradable containers.
Do you know about the Catholic cemeteries?
I don't think they do though. I mean, like, there's no real reason. I mean, there's not a lot of reason, you know, like refrigeration is actually very, very effective. So, yeah, I would ask them, I can't say for sure, their rules and regulations are available on their website, but I've never heard anything that they would require anything like that. Steven? Oh, yes.
So we have a question from one of our members who is watching on Zoom. And she's been doing research on Marie Laveau's tomb, also called the Glapion tomb in St. Louis, #1. And she's been through the burial books at the Archdiocesan Archives and found who's buried there. But she's trying to understand who was the original owner of that cemetery plot and tomb. And she's tried her best to access that information, but has been told no, that she can't access it. Can you talk about who has the right to ownership information?
Yeah. So, this is sometimes the case, like where you try to reach out to a cemetery authority and they cannot give you the title holder record or will not in some cases. That's tough because again, it's the cemetery authority that's required to keep that documentation. So kind of nobody else is, right? But, I will say that a lot of the digitized records here at the library and at the New Orleans Public Library, well, not digitized, sorry, microfilm, look for the term lot register. Because that will be a deed book. It would be a way that you could access historic records of property ownership not going directly through the cemetery authority. That I'm not sure if that would be possible for the person asking about the Glapion tomb, but it would be the only place that I would know to look.
Just about the Marie Laveau tomb, if you go to St. Louis Cemetery, I think, is that one #1?
That's number one.
Okay, there's actually a tour of it, and one of the tour guides there, she's an older woman, I think her name is Mary. She's very knowledgeable about the history and the original ownership. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Has anybody done that? I think her name is Mary Gordon. I'm trying to find Mary Brand. Pardon? Mary Brandon. That's it. Yes, Mary Brandon.
I mean, it's certainly not something that I have any expertise in, but I mean, the best thing I can think of in terms of finding the ownership of that tomb, it would be a lot register.
But I recall, because I did the tour
Yeah.
just in October, so it's a little fresh. But Mary she knew a lot of that information, so perhaps Stephen, who's asking that online, if you could pass that information to,
Okay.
I don't know if they
Yeah.
can hear me. And then just for anybody who's interested, it's actually a really very interesting tour. Just don't go when it's pouring down rain. You can't hear a thing.
There's the only way you get in there, and most of those tour guides from, Michigan, somewhere else.
This lady is local. It's very much a local lady.
I actually just called her. Sorry. But then, yes, I'll get you next night. Hi, Charlie. That man's a title holder. But I did kind of call on you because I'm sorry.
So if someone's trying to do a transfer by affidavit, and one of the things they need is, to get the other successors in interest, you transfer their interest to that person. Is there some type of template for the wording for that?
Oh God, I wish I could tell you there is. If you want, email me. I can. So what I had done, like, if I could find a way to, like, I have examples of these things, but I would need to effectively redact them. And once you effectively redact them, it's kind of like, what does this say, right?
But I don't want to go through all of this and then have some kind of technicality about the cemetery or the whatever.
Sure.
They
Sure, send me an email, I'll see what I can do to find something that would be applicable to what your situation is. Yeah, absolutely. Charlie's talking to somebody.
Okay, let's add this useless piece of ground and then a cemetery that I can't bury in.
Yeah.
What do you do with it?
Well, I would imagine, when was it bought?
1961, 2, and that era.
Did it come with a perpetual care?
Yes.
Like, so in that case, you visited and you
Start with-
kind of, yeah. Yeah, I mean, but at least it's under perpetual care, and Metairie does have a pretty good perpetual care fund, so there's at least that, but yeah, no, there wouldn't be any action you'd be able to take.
Well, I also have one reading book as well,
Yeah,
that I inherit. So, but I want to be in Metairie where the rest of the family is not where the outcasts are.
I would certainly make the effort to see if they would amend it, but I have to agree that I think it would be.
So,
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Bye, hey Charlie.
The, tour that thing, Louis number one, I handle by Basin Street Station, hop on, hop off. That's the only way you can go in this thing, where's
Yeah.
number one at?
Yeah.
You can't go with any other company.
Nope.
I'm a tour guide.
Yeah.
I don't work for them anymore.
And a title holder.
Secondly, I think the records for the cemetery on City Park Avenue. And, they've got number three, they moved it.
Oh, St. Louis number 3.
They had number three.
Oh, City Park Avenue. Oh, did they move them? I thought that they moved back to St. Louis 3.
They might ask me something a year ago.
Yeah.
Number three, thank you very much for helping me with my situation that last, yeah, now. Can of worms, when are they gonna open it?
When are they gonna open Lafayette number 1? I am so fortunate, and there's a few people here who know that I am so fortunate not to have to answer that question.
Yeah, you are.
I will say that we wrote a tour program, that is still available on the website, and it just simply hasn't been out. I think that the people who are running it, there's a lot of really hopeful things that they're working on, so be patient with them. Any other questions? Sure.
Are there any protections or allowances for, burials to be made on private property in any way?
That is a very good question. So the question was, are there any allowances for burials to be made on private property? I am sure that is a part of Title VIII. But it's not a part of Title VIII I'm familiar with. I am not sure. I think that would be, I almost wonder if the cemetery board website would have something about that. Because people do have cemeteries on private property. I know that to make a cemetery now, like if you wanted to establish a new cemetery, it has to be 5 acres, it has to be walled, it has to be zoned a certain way. So I don't know if that's the requirement they would have on a family cemetery. Yeah, so no, I would say maybe look at Title VIII. That's a really good question.
And what do they do with the headstones when you put 100 people in, how do they get all the names? Or do they even do?
Well, so actually, I'll say, so the question was, what do you do with, how do you get all the names on the headstones when there's 100 people in a tomb? I'll answer that 2 things. One, yeah, you put them on the side, like all over the side, in the back and everything. But I will also say, I had the really good fortune of working in Lafayette number 1 for a very long time, including doing a survey of the cemetery. And I know what the records were as well, that in 1874, there might have been as many as 70,000 people buried in that cemetery. It's only 4 acres, right? I can tell you that there are 7,000 names written on tablets in that cemetery. So that's an idea of just how long these things survive, and just how precious what we're looking at is in terms, because I'm not saying all of those people had tablets that with their names on them, but plenty of them probably did. Things fall away, so I mean, everything that you do see is a precious survivor. Well, thank you guys so much for your time.